Screen time has become a dirty word for parents, and maybe for good reason. Screens have become a surrogate. You look around today, and in any public space, you'll see toddlers sitting quietly staring at a screen like it's the most interesting thing in the world. You enter any home, and most people are likely to be glued to one of a half dozen screens in the house. You get a notification on your watch, which you answer on your smartphone while you're watching a movie on your tablet, while also pretending to do work on your laptop, all while playing games on your TV. How many screens can we put between ourselves and the real world? Never enough. Why do we do it? Well, there's as many reasons as there are people. For my part, I'm like a globetrotter. All my loved ones are basically on the other end of a screen. Sure, I'm good at making friends, but it's not the same as growing up in a community. My wife and I, we've been raising our kids completely alone. We have no grandparents to help, no extended family around. And you don't even have to be as international as I am to be in the same situation. You can have moved to a big city and your experience will be no different to mine. The village that used to help us raise our children is gone. We're working more while making less. Efficiency is up. Salaries are stagnant. Both parents are often working. It's tough out here. So we rely on screens to relieve stress, to keep our kids from acting out, to distract them from the fact that mom and dad can't give them the kind of attention we'd like to. It's a crutch. It's a symptom of the modern world. And even though many of us are aware of this, we still judge. We judge others, we judge ourselves. But hey, I'm not here to stress you out. I'm here to break down the science behind the screen. Also, I want to give you a science-based approach that you can apply to make life better for you and your family. But a note of caution. Let's talk about the emotional brain. So neuroscience says that the brain is roughly split into three parts. The logical brain, which is the voice in your head, the emotional brain, which is where your feelings come from, and the computer. That helps you automate boring tasks. It's important to note that the emotional brain is 5 times bigger than the logical brain. If you've ever heard the expression, emotion is the death of reason, that's because when we get emotional, it's very difficult to do the logical thing. This is especially true when we're discussing difficult subjects. Researchers are finding that when we have strongly held beliefs and someone challenges us on them, it triggers a very, very strong emotional reaction. When you're in that heightened state, it's impossible for us to hear the logic in the other person's argument. We feel like we're being attacked, and our instinct is to either fight back or run away. Screen time might just be a hot topic issue like this for many of us. I know a lot of parents struggling with it today. So when I'm talking about the science behind screen time, I'm not like stating facts, I'm not pontificating, I'm just exploring the research and reporting it to you. If you find yourself getting hot and bothered, it's okay, that's normal. With all that said, let's take a deep dive into screen time. So, this study, led by the University of California, San Diego, and the Laureate Institute for Brain Research, aimed to understand how screen time affects the brains of children. The research was part of a large project called the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study, the ABCD study. It follows thousands of 9 and 10-year-olds over many years. So they start at 9 years old and they follow them well into their teens. They wanted to figure out how much screen time affects children's brains. They looked at a bunch of different activities like playing video games, watching TV and online videos, and social media use. They scanned the brains of over 4,200 children to see if certain areas were changing because of all the screen time. The goal was basically to see if there were any effects on the brain structure and if that linked to things like behavior or intelligence. What they found was interesting. Some parts of the brain, especially those involved with seeing and controlling impulses, were affected by screens. For example, the more time children spent on video games, the more changes researchers saw in parts of the brain related to visual processing and decision making. But it wasn't all bad. Some types of screen time helped children with things like problem solving. So what they found was not every form of screen time is harmful, but it definitely has noticeable effects on how a child's brain is developing. Let's break down video games first. Video games were found to influence problem solving and fluid intelligence. It actually had a positive effect on those two. Fluid intelligence is your ability to solve problems logically and deal with new challenges without relying on prior knowledge. It's about dealing with the unknown and the unexpected, and that's pretty important. Another thing that they found is that frequent gaming led to better visual attention and reaction times. But it was also found that it reduced impulse control in areas like the prefrontal cortex. So you get better at recognizing your environment, your reflexes improve, but you tend to become more impulsive is basically what it breaks down to. These are interesting findings because a lot of less scrupulous video game developers actually rely on research from gaming consultants. That's not like video game consultants, that's gaming as in gambling experts who work to get video games to be more addictive. And that's also an interesting thing to consider about these studies. You know, they're lucky to have the funding and the ability to look at so many children, but everything has its limitations. Not all video games are made equal. Would they have found differences if the whole point of the study was to see what the impact of wholesome educational games was versus those that deliver rapid spikes of dopamine? You know, who knows? Playing video games also increased aggression and risky behaviors, so it's a trade-off. Some video games help you improve strategic thinking and planning skills, while at the same time they lead to thinner cortices in regions linked to decision making. They also found that kids who played lots of video games had better spatial awareness. Let's move on to social media. So social media is a very loaded term these days, and you can see from the results why. Social media was found to reduce memory-related areas like the hippocampus. It worsened crystallized intelligence, which is your ability to understand and recognize facts and knowledge. And it also reduced empathy and social understanding. Now, for passive things like watching television or videos, the researchers found that TV and movies and videos tended to reduce people's decision-making abilities. It thinned the occipital cortex, which also affects visual processing. So it lowered emotional control while reducing your ability to make decisions and also weakened your eyes. They also found that children watching too much TV and videos online, they showed weaker links to cognitive skills. And they found that watching too many clips on the internet or watching too much television increased externalizing behaviors like hyperactivity and aggression. If you look at their general findings, they found that kids with higher screen times showed this tendency of being more hyperactive or acting aggressively, and excessive screen time reduced gray matter in the emotional regulation areas. So screen time overall had no major links to internalizing behaviors like anxiety and depression, but there is definitely a connection between externalizing behaviors like aggression and hyperactivity. So this next study was also part of the ABCD study, and it's one of the largest ongoing research projects in the United States. They're aiming to understand how children's brains develop as they grow into young adults and how that's affected by screen time. The study involved nearly 12,000 children, starting at the ages of 9 and 10 from different regions across the US. The researchers behind the study came from well-known institutions like the Icahn School of Medicine at New York, the Medical University of South Carolina, and several other universities across the US, as well as one in the Czech Republic. The goal of this study was to research how children and how young teenagers use screens. They looked at smartphones, video games, social media, and they measured how these activities are impacting behaviors and development over time. It turns out that kids are spending heaps of time sitting in front of screens. The three main takeaways from this study were that there are addiction patterns related to screens, and these are different based on gender. Parents don't really know how much time children spend looking at screens, and screen time increases with age. If we look at screen usage patterns by gender, the basic gist of it is that boys spend more time playing video games compared to girls, and girls spend more time on social media than boys. Both of them had distinct usage patterns depending on the type of screen activity. So for the increase in screen time as they aged, they found that whatever the activity was, video games, social media, TV, movies, just generally staring at a screen, they increased from ages 9 and 10 to 11 and 12. Boys showed a sharper increase in video game usage, while girls tended to spend more time on social media, to the surprise of no one, I guess. So on weekends, screen time would be 50% higher than during the week. And parents consistently were underestimating how much children were looking at screens. The average screen time was about 4 hours per day for preteens and 7 hours a day for teenagers. There were also gender differences in screen time, but specifically with screen addiction. The way the study ran was that they gave children questionnaires over time and they compared answers. The questions that the children would be asked was like, I play video games so much that it has a bad effect on my homework. The answer is 1, never, and 6, very often. So what they found was interesting. The girls scored higher on the social media addiction questionnaire with an average of about 6, while the boys scored about 4.9 or basically 5. The boys had significantly higher scores in the video game addiction questionnaire with an average of 11 compared to girls who had 5. In terms of device ownership and usage, by the age of 12, 69% of children owned their own smartphone and 85% of adolescents were consistently engaged in recreational screen activities. Let's look at their conclusions. Now, while these findings are compelling, there's a lot of data, we also have to consider the limitations of the study. When we hear girls scored higher on the social media addiction questionnaire, we might have that knee-jerk reaction like, I knew it, or yeah, no, social media is crazy addictive, of course. But when you dig down, you see that girls scored on average about 6 while boys scored 5, right? When you see that, you think, okay, the numbers aren't actually that different. Boys had much higher scores for video game addiction, which was more than double compared to the girls. So boys averaged 11 and the girls averaged 5. Now that's a significant difference, but it's also a self-reported questionnaire, which has the highest possible score of 36. If the children are averaging 5 or 11 out of 36, how addicted are they really? Also, you have to look at the other limitation, which is the screen time was limited to what we would consider a waste of time. There's nothing about educational apps. There's nothing about the apps that they use in school, just entertainment, things that we as a society don't consider to be as valuable as other pursuits. This study, led by researchers from the University of Sydney and the Medical University of South Carolina, wanted to figure out how kids were spending their time on screens and if that resulted in them skipping other recreational activities like sports, music, art, so on. The researchers worked with over 9,000 children, again, aged 9 to 10. This is another branch of the ABCD study. And they wanted to see whether screen time replaced more important activities and if it was leading to less physical or creative engagement in children. What they found was actually pretty surprising. Even though the kids were definitely using screens a lot, it didn't seem like that screen time was pushing them out of their other activities as much as you might expect. Things like family income and parental education, as well as how children interacted with their parents, had a much, much bigger impact on whether the kids were participating in sports or hobbies. While screens were a big part of the children's lives, other factors like socioeconomic background had a much larger role in determining how often they got involved with sports and other activities. So if you look at screen time and gender differences, it's the same as before. Boys spend significantly more time in video games than girls. Girls use social media more frequently than boys. Boys were more likely to play soccer and baseball compared to girls, and girls were more engaged in music and art activities than boys. Now, the most significant impact that they saw, the highest numbers, was the socioeconomic impact. Children from wealthier families were significantly more likely to take part in sports and hobbies. Specifically, households with incomes over $100,000 were 3 times more likely to participate in recreational activities than households earning less than $50,000. Children whose parents had a bachelor's degree were 5.5 times more likely to engage with healthy, useful activities compared to those whose parents didn't even finish high school. If you look at kids from educated households, they had a substantially higher involvement in arts and music. while kids from single-parent households participated less often in group-based sports and creative activities. They found that low-income families watching TV and playing games, again, had a tiny impact on reducing the amount of time spent on hobbies and sports. And kids who played more video games tended to be less interested in things like music. Similarly, on the other end, social media had a small but noticeable impact on poor engagement in physical sports. Another thing which was found to have a significant impact was the family and social environment of the child. So families with greater conflict had a huge impact on reducing involvement in recreational activities. Kids who had more screen use and had less parental monitoring would have less participation in structured recreational activities. Things like parental education and a parent's active engagement in their child's life were key factors in driving whether the child would take part in physical or creative activities. While you might think that more time spent on screens would mean less time for other creative or physical pursuits, the results tell a different story. It turns out that screens aren't as big a culprit for keeping kids off the soccer field or away from piano lessons as we might imagine. Family income, parents' education, and how parents interact with their children played a much bigger role in determining what activities the children got involved in. Yes, boys spent more time on video games and girls were on social media more often, but those screen activities didn't seem to drastically replace sports or hobbies. Okay, so we looked at 3 studies on screen time. If you want me to include more next time, let me know in the comments below. But in the end, what actionable advice can you as a parent take home from all of this science? Depending on the type of screen time, there could be more negative effects than positive. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What you put in is what you get out. How you do anything is how you do everything. Clichés are the last defense of an unoriginal mind. Wait, what? So the average person has 900 months to live, and 300 months of that is spent sleeping. If your kids are spending 7-8 hours a day, they're essentially losing 260 months of their remaining waking lives staring at a screen. So before you panic and you overhaul your whole life, think about this. The genie is out of the bottle. Sometimes it's better to substitute something than to cut it out entirely. You can empower yourself to make screen time about something besides entertainment. So here are some simple science-based changes that you can make in your life that will have a big impact on how your family handles screen time. Screen time tip number 1 for parents. Use screen time as a reward. After sports, after creative hobbies, after doing homework, after cleaning or doing chores. Don't let your child just come home, drop onto the couch and deactivate, because they will immediately start looking at a screen and doing something which is going to make them sedentary, and you're going to have all the negative effects of screen time. Instead, introduce a step where they have to earn it. Make a family calendar, put it on the wall, and every week should have lots of boxes on it. Boxes for chores, boxes for homework, boxes for sports. Only once all those boxes are ticked can they have added with screen time. Screen tip number 2 for parents. Introduce balance to your family's screen activities. Use screen time to improve problem-solving skills. If you get an app like Matific, we're a fantastic math learning resource. Your child will spend time learning mathematical concepts down to their core. When you're letting them transition into screen time, start them off with something that develops their education or their creative skills. Whatever they're interested in or show talent for, substitute the screen time first with something useful and then let them move on to their entertainment. Screen tip number 3 for parents, cutoff times. Reward screen cutoff time. If your kid stops using screens by the deadline, which, it's easy to monitor these days, you give them a reward. My children are small, so I like to give out stickers. We put stars on a calendar, and this translates to real bonuses in their monthly allowances. That way, they're learning to be responsible with money and they have tangible rewards for their hard work. You figure out what works for you and your family. Screen time tip number 4. Design your environment for success. Add extra steps for screen access. Unplug your TV, don't leave it on in the background. Take your video game consoles and put them away into a cupboard when they're not being used. Don't give your child passwords to every tablet or computer, or have parental controls enabled so that the screen automatically turns off after a given period of time. So for me, my wife and I, we started by making the conscious decision that how our kids interact with the screen isn't just about being passive or being entertained. we swap things out. If they want to watch something mindless or play games, we make doing that a reward for things like chores and schoolwork. Sometimes we give them a study app or something where they can draw or make music, and we tell them, okay, you can spend as much time as you want doing your thing, but first you have to earn it. And of course, I want to know about you. How do you handle screen time? What is your strategy? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from everyone. Don't look at screens like they're an enemy. They're a neutral tool. We can make use of them to learn. We can take back control. Personally, I avoid negative self-talk. Things are hard enough as they are. I don't limit myself or my family, and I don't also believe in toxic positivity. There's balance to be had with all things. Thank you so much for sticking with us to the end. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, subscribe, and please comment down below. It really helps us grow and reach more children with Matific. We've got lots more videos on ed tech, game-based learning, and mathematics coming your way. If there's another topic you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below. I've also linked the sources I used in this video so you can check them out in the description. And don't forget to try Matific. It's a game-based math learning system for students aged 5 to 15. We have thousands of activities. We're in 10,000 schools, hundreds of thousands of teachers, with millions of students solving billions of math problems every year. Matific is not a game that teaches math. Matific teaches that math is a game. So try it free for 7 days. The link is in the description. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.
What is it about math? Why do so many kids grow to hate it? Imagine this. Imagine being made to memorize sheet music but never getting the opportunity to play. Imagine studying the lyrics but never hearing the song. Next, imagine you have to memorize and reproduce these lyrics perfectly, or you fail. Your teacher makes you do it in front of the whole class. You mess up and everyone laughs. When a child tells us, "I hate that," we at Matific say, "Good, you should hate that. You are correct in hating that." Students who hate math, or they're afraid of it, or they have math anxiety, will love the opportunity to instead play a game to learn. We've seen it before, all over the world. It's the ones who hate math that love Matific the most. That love of Matific slowly lets them understand that what they're enjoying about the experience is what math really is. And let's not forget, Matific can also adapt to stretch the abilities of kids gifted at math to make them even better at it. With over 2,000 games purpose-built to give meaning to math, there are no angry red crosses. There is no embarrassment in the face of failure. With Matific, students quickly learn that getting the answer wrong isn't a bug, it's a feature. Once students see math as a puzzle, they unlearn their anxiety and they start to think that maybe, just maybe, math can be fun. It's been true in so many countries around the world. The activities that Matific kids love in Australia are the same ones that kids love in the US, are the same ones that they love in Canada and Latin America and Africa and Europe and Asia. That's what we're bringing into your home, your school, and the lives of eager learners all over the world. The future of game-based education. Matific is not a game that teaches math. Matific teaches that math is the game. So let's change how our children view mathematics. And let's spread this message as far and wide as we can. Try Matific now, absolutely free, and watch your children become math superstars.